Okay, so I've listened to a bunch of reviews on Batman versus Superman, and man, I've heard so many different angles and so many different perspectives and so many different things that I have to weigh in on what I'm hearing and what I actually saw and what was actually in the movie. Um, I don't think that the movie was terrible. I've had 2 days to think about it because when I came out of the movie, like many people, the movie wasn't what I expected. And some of the qualities of the film went, it was like a leash needed to be, people were wearing their leashes, directors, writers, etc. And the leash needed to be pulled in, because folks kind of went a little nuts and they allowed their love of the characters to get the better of them. And there are things in the film that don't necessarily make all the sense that they could. And that's frustrating because Batman and Superman have been around for so long that this should not be that difficult. You know what I'm saying? Like, it shouldn't be hard to tell a story that's been told 50 billion times already. You should be able to easily retell this story. And for some reason, everybody wants so hard to put their stamp on things that they just ignore all the logic, you know. But there was logic. Some of the stuff that happened in the film was very logical. Some of the stuff that happened in the film, it happened within a proper sequence of events, so you got the idea. There was, foreshadowing. There was, like, the seeds being planted for things that were going to happen later in the film, the way that you're supposed to do in a film. Um, yeah, it may not be everyone's cup of tea, but if we're being objective, they went through the proper uh, channels, you know? So I'm going to start at the beginning. The direction of the film. Zack Snyder is a director, and I tell people this every time I do a review, especially on something big in pop culture. A director is responsible for the visual language of the film. The end result of how the film looks, how things are conveyed visually, that is your director. So blaming the director for the story elements makes no sense, because if you're blaming him for the story elements, then you don't realize that he's not responsible for the story unless it says written and directed by. So the people you should be blaming for all the wrong that was done in this film are Chris Terrio and David Goyer. Can't stand him. I've hated him since the Blade films because there are things, since Blade 3, I'll say, I hated him. Because I realized that he's not as talented as, he would have you believe. It's other people who they know how to take the good stuff from what he makes and utilize that. And that makes perfect sense because, I mean, if you're a director, you have to be able to say, I'm sorry, especially on a smaller movie, when you're a director, you have more control. When it's a big movie, the producers have all the control. All you're doing is exactly what you've been told to do. So if they hire you to make the shit look pretty, then you're going to make the movie look pretty. That's what you do. That's your job. That's how you get down. That's what you're being paid for. So I believe that in the case of these movies, yes, um, Snyder wanted to do a Batman film. We know he did. He said it himself. He's always wanted to do Batman. So he got the opportunity to, but I don't think necessarily that he got to do the things that he personally would have done if he wrote the script. I think it would have been a way worse movie because he's a fan. He would have tried to do pretty much Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and, that's not the best Batman story. It's actually very anti-Batman in many ways because there's a lot of things in the story that Batman does, but they never explain to you why he does it. Why is Batman so crazy? Why is Batman killing people? Why does Batman steal all the stuff that he steals from the military? Why doesn't he have his own stuff? If you're an artist or a designer, you know why. It's because Frank Miller couldn't draw the stuff that everybody else had created for Batman that became a staple. he had to make up his own weird looking stuff to fit his own sensibilities. And that's, it's the way it is. And then also Frank Miller's an angry person. So of course Batman had to be a crotchety old guy that's really angry and really, GOP, all about guns and stuff, even though Batman has been anti-guns for so long because it's what spawned the character. So there's a lot of things about, the Dark Knight Returns that's overrated. That's why the sequels can never work, because it was a one-off thing. It worked because of the time. It worked. The animated film worked because they even tweaked the story in that. And you really can't do much more with it. But people keep on trying to find ways to use that as the basis for, their version of Batman. And it's getting tired, because there's so many good versions of Batman that you could use that people will also vibe on also, But anyway, Goyer sucks. Terrio is a good writer. So I think a lot of the good stuff in this movie that made sense, scenario-wise, a lot of the really intelligent things that happened in there, like the whole thing about the whole thing with the Kryptonian battleship explaining everything to Luthor, and then Luthor understanding that, Darkseid is one of the characters out there that's probably the big bad that's going to come for us. Like, things like that, where he didn't hold your hand and tell you it was in the movie. All you had to do was pay attention. You could tell that's, Chris Terrio, because that's a good writer. That's the way you write stuff. And if I'm wrong, then hey, that's a good thing that David Goyer did. But David Goyer usually doesn't write that kind of cohesive narrative. He writes more of a, like, bits and pieces, and someone else has to string all that together to make it work. If you don't believe me, just watch Blade Trinity. There's a lot of parts in the movie that had, the makings of a good scene, but they didn't work because he was the one that wrote it and directed the film. So no one was there to rein him in or to help say, like, this needs to connect to this. How did we get here? Anyway, director does the visuals, writers do all the story beats, and all the things you thought were weak, the writers are responsible for that. Now, the story, to me, overall, because we have to start with the story, it's like just kind of meh, because they tried really hard to mix up two really popular stories, from back in the time, and Death of Superman and Dark Knight Returns, but with both of them, they didn't really take all of the story. It's like they took the idea of the story and then they smashed them together. Now, when you do something like that, you lose a lot because the context of those things that you took from that story are now missing. Like, we don't know what exactly happened to Batman to make him, we don't even know that he was retired, because the movie never says he was retired. He just goes out and starts doing stuff, and we're supposed to believe that, actually, the way the movie plays out, he's just still been doing what he's doing. He's just older. It's not that he ever retired. He never stopped. It's just 20 years ago he started, and he's still going. So once again, things taken out of context. He's older. How much older is he? You know what I mean? Is he 40? Is he 50? Like, how old is he and how old was he when he started? I guess it's not relevant to the grand, scheme of the big picture. But these are all things you want to know, because in The Dark Knight Returns, Batman was 60. He was 60 plus. So seeing him do all this stuff and seeing him get tired in the beginning and seeing him forcing his body to actually do what needed to be done, it's a whole different dynamic. Then on the Superman side, a lot of things that were going on in the Death of Superman, you didn't even, like, all the supporting cast members, you know what I mean? Like John Henry Irons, like freaking Con-El, like Cadmus, like all those places, they didn't even pull any of that stuff into the story, which would have it would have set up more of the world, and it would have been like, oh, okay, this makes sense. All these people have popped up based on, Superman's appearance. I mean, they say it's 2 years after Man of Steel. So can we see all that, Like, is that too much to ask, that we can't see more of the world. I mean, the best thing in the movie for me was seeing all the pieces of the world kind of fit together. I loved that. I loved seeing, Metropolis and seeing all its players, and then seeing Gotham and seeing a lot of its players. But if you think about it, it was very contained. They didn't go that far. You didn't see, your Catwoman. You didn't see you didn't hear what happened to, like, the main villains from Batman's stable. And then in Superman's stable, it's 2 years and you didn't even hear of any other villains. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm getting besides myself, but the story was very meh. I was not super impressed with the way the story worked. I was expecting more from the story. I was expecting more of an interconnected story with all the characters that were possibly going to show up in this film, and we didn't get that. Um, there were a lot of, people said there were a lot of holes. I think most of the holes were just badly edited out parts of the story that we're going to get back in the Blu-ray and DVD release. Because, I mean, Agent O mentioned this, and, I've heard other people mention it. The movie just felt like they chopped it up. There were so many things missing where you just ended up somewhere. It didn't feel like you naturally got there. It just felt like, hey, this is about to happen, so let's go see what's going on over there. Kind of like someone playing with their toys just because, like you just picked up 2 figures and you wanted to make them fight, and then you want to pick up 2 more figures and make them fight. That's kind of how it felt. Like you just jumped from thing to thing to thing. In some places, not overall, but in a bunch of places. There were things in the film that I think, and this is where I'm going to now do the pros and the cons. These are some things in the story that I loved overall. I loved the use of the main characters in their respective worlds. I liked seeing that they solidified how messed up Batman was. Really early in the film, you're like, damn, he's messed up. Because the first scene you see, or second scene or part of the first scene is a dream sequence. And you're like, wow, this guy thinks that the bats, like, subconsciously the bats helped him ascend to something. Like, I guess they inspired him for sure. Then there's the other part where he has the dream of being attacked by that gargoyle bat demon thing. It's like, whoa, why are you dreaming about this stuff? Like, you are a troubled individual, And they showed like his nightstand, and he had like all the alcohol, and then he had like painkillers and stuff. So he's pretty troubled. I get that. Okay, fine. You guys love that so much. Fine, whatever. That's for those fans who want their troubled, flawed character so that they can project all their problems onto him and say, yes, I'm flawed too. I'm cool. And then you have Superman, who he's trying his best to do the right thing, and the world is freaking running him over the coals, freaking put him through the ringer. Just everything he does, there's some kind of ulterior motive, even though there's not. As if it's impossible for someone to just do good because they want to do good. And it's kind of strange because you think about all what you see in the film, and you just see him helping people. You see him going all over the world helping folks for no reason other than they're in danger. And somehow they're extracting this nonsense about him being a threat. And it's like, he's a threat to those who are doing wrong things, like the terrorist that he saved Lois from. He pushed that one guy through a wall, and it was hilarious. But it's like, yeah, if you're going to be that guy, then you have to worry. But if you're going to be Lois, you're in good hands because nothing's going to happen to you. So, it was like a direct contradiction or contrast to what we had seen in Man of Steel that people were complaining so much about, where they kept saying how that Superman didn't really save people, that Superman didn't do this, that Superman didn't do that, blah, 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 blah. And now you see him saving people a lot. You know what I mean? And you're seeing people react to it. You're seeing more messianic visuals to make you feel like, okay, I see the whole thing. I mean, actually, the whole angle about him being a Messiah, they actually like played that up. That was like part of the philosophical conversation that was going on throughout the movie, which I was not prepared for because these movies didn't really get deep. Not like that, you know what I mean? So I was surprised that they went there. So I give them props for that. Um, I liked that they, it felt like they were building a more, like a deeper connection with the world around him as far as for Superman, as far as how the world views him. But I did not like how they just threw in this negative angle for the sake of throwing it in, and it didn't even feel like it fit. I mean, if a guy is saving people, seconds from their death, he's saving folks from situations that, if he didn't, they wouldn't be here. How can anybody, just listen to the media say blah, 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 and, he's, negative, negative, and then everybody goes with it? The funny thing about it is that's exactly how it works. It's exactly, they're treating him the same way that the internet treated Man of Steel, and the same way the internet treats good people in general. If you are a good person and you have your own opinion and you stand up for people, or you don't agree with the mainstream group think, you're always the enemy. You're always attacked. People say stuff like they hope you die, blah, 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 whatever. They hate you simply because you don't want to fit in. You know what I mean? Your opinion, your perspective, your philosophy doesn't fit in with the group think. And that's usually how it is. So it's 100% accurate, and I like that. But it just seems weird that this perspective, this point that I'm making, wasn't also in the movie, where someone said they just hate you because they can't control you, or they just hate you because you won't conform. I'm sorry. Like, they should have said that, But I mean, I guess you could say that Ma Kent kind of said that stuff too, but whatever. So anyway, now I've talked about the story overall. There's a lot of things going on. Now let me talk about more the characters within the story. Everyone loved Batman. You knew everyone was going to love Batman. This was a no-brainer. You just put a diesel white guy who can at least marginally act in the role, and everybody's going to love him because all the beats are built in. You don't even have to worry about who the actor is. He just needs to look, chiseled and rugged, and they got to put him in the big old bat suit and make him have all the cool weaponry and all the cool everything, and everyone will love him because he's Batman. Everyone loved Batman. No one really complained about how much he kills, even though Batman also has a no-kill rule. So, once again, internet, that's how they do. Here is your bowl of crow, eat it. Superman. Henry Cavill was not really given a lot. He was good, don't get me wrong. And I think he's good because he follows directions, and at the same time, there's some stuff about the character that he understands that a lot of other people don't. Now, as a person, he just likes to get paid to look pretty in front of the camera. You can tell he said it. He says stupid stuff all the time. Just look up that sad Affleck or Batfleck meme that they have up from that interview on yahoo.com or Yahoo Movies, and you'll see what I'm talking about. He loves to talk. He loves to be in front of the camera. He loves to be the center of attention. In this, he seems reserved. He seems very sympathetic. You feel like, damn, he's just trying to do good, and they're not letting him. They're running him through the coals. Everything he does is being put under a microscope, and there is still no evidence of anything evil. So you really feel, I mean, if you have some kind of, sympathy or anything in your heart, you're going to feel sorry for Superman, because the way they treat him is the way that the world treats him. Like, when you have these conversations with comic book fans, unless they're Superman fans themselves, there are always people saying crap like, Superman's corny, he's too powerful, he's boring, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't have any flaws, he's perfect, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, you didn't read a Superman comic, so you don't know the inner turmoil of the character, His problem is that Clark is the mask, and Superman is who he really is, but he would rather be Clark. You know what I mean? Like, he has all these powers. He's a dork who has all these powers. He knows what you're supposed to do with them, but he would rather just be a weak, regular person and hang out with mankind. It's like fallen angels, angels that give up their grace so that they can hang out amongst humankind because they fall in love with us. It's the same concept, except he cannot do that. They tried to explore that in the Donner, was that Superman 2? But you know what I mean? It'd be so much worse. So that's his problem. I think they went over that really well. The fact that he loves Lois so much is pretty cool. It's just funny that like I said with the story, there's a lot of things that you needed to see happen gradually that you never see, and like their relationship is one of them. Like one movie ago, they had just met. They kind of fell in love, but you don't know if they went through anything. And then next movie, they're full fledged in love. He's ready to marry her. Which, I mean, it happens, but I'm just saying, like, where was the transition to that? They sped over that. It's kind of weird. But I guess one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that this is not Man of Steel 2. This is, Batman versus Superman. So this is an in-between. There is going to be a Man of Steel 2. At least this is what has been reported. So maybe they'll start over and that stuff will be there. Or maybe this was their way of getting over the hump that, DC had created by saying that none of their heroes could be married and they should be, single and stuff. And they figured, hey, well, we'll keep them single, but we're going to have Superman inadvertently or, posthumously marry Lois Lane so that when he comes back, it's just a given and we don't have to really go over it. I don't know. But, I wish that there was a little more of that so you could see how they got there. Alfred was amazing. Jeremy Irons was sarcastic and he was extremely multifaceted. He did all kinds of things. He's responsible for maintenance to the bat suits, the cars. I mean, you could kind of tell that those two built everything. So I like that. That feels more like the Batman that we've seen in the comics and the Alfred that we've seen in the comics. Like he would sew bats up after he gets, cut when he's out doing what he does, all that makes sense to me and I like that and it works for me. Made me happy. I like his sarcasm because he's been doing this for a long time and he's much older than Bruce. So watching Bruce constantly beat himself up while doing this job that he appointed himself, it's going to get to you. And the fact that Bruce got so good at it, he can make those jokes, because he knows for the most part, dude will survive, or at least he hopes he will. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, my God, or Diana of Themyscira, because they never call her Wonder Woman, and that made me very happy. I hope they never do call her Wonder Woman. I hope they always call her Diana, because she really is not an alter ego. She just puts on armor, She was perfect. I was surprised because, Agent O and I have talked about this. Me and ODC That's Me have talked about this. I always felt Gina Carano was perfect for the role because she just looks the part. Like he said, Agent O, she looks a lot like Adam Hughes' artwork of Wonder Woman. And, she doesn't have to say that much because she's not one of those characters who talks and talks and talks and talks. She just has to say a couple things in the right moment and then she has to fight. But they got her character perfect in this. She was outsmarting Batman. She was, sarcastic in her own right. She wasn't just a pretty face, pretty body, you know what I mean? She was like a full-fledged character. She just happened to be female and happened to be, a Greek goddess or demigoddess or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It just was well done. The fact that even while fighting Doomsday, everyone else is kind of scared, shitless, and she was smiling when she was getting hit back from Doomsday, because it's like, oh crap, it's a challenge. All right, I'll take this challenge. She was enjoying it because life is pretty boring when you fight for a living and you don't get to do that for a long time, So I had no issues with her. She even looked healthier, so much healthier than what we had seen before. I mean, granted, she's not she's on the slim athletic side, whereas the Wonder Woman we know is more on the busty muscular side. It still worked because some artists do draw her more slim and athletic. So, like I said, I was wrong. She ate all her chicken breasts and her, rice and she drank her protein shakes and she got pretty healthy. And I like that. It made me happy. The costume looked amazing. I was like, wow, that actually looks right. who else? Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Alexander Luthor. So this is my gripe with this character. People's assumptions going into the film is that he is Lex, the son of Lionel Luthor, when he's not. He is Alexander Luthor Jr., which is the son of Lex Luthor Sr., Alexander Luthor Sr. It's frustrating that people think, when they think the name of Lex, and I guess it's because a lot of people don't really know comics as well as they think they do, but they're going in saying, oh, I know it's his son, but he should have acted like his dad. And it's like, wait up. Alexander Luthor was kind of a weird character to begin with. He felt like a creepier version of Xanatos from Gargoyles. And he showed up in a lot of stories, Elseworld stories especially, and he had like a god complex and all these weird, he just was a strange guy. So like the fact that they distilled the essence of that character by making him smarmy and giving him all these nervous tics and this weird eccentric personality, it's like, okay, he's a whole different character. It's okay for him to not act and feel exactly like his dad. They're two different people. So, given the material Jesse Eisenberg was given, I think he did a good job. I don't like the guy. I mean, I don't think we're supposed to, which means he did an even better job. It's like when I first saw New Jack City, I hated Nino Brown. I mean, to the point where I thought Wesley Snipes was Nino Brown. I think that was the second movie I had seen Wesley Snipes in. The first one was parts of Jungle Fever. But I didn't like Jesse Eisenberg, and you're not supposed to, because he's the villain. You're not supposed to be sympathetic to him, but you're supposed to understand some of his points. The biggest points is his points on God. The dude has issues with the concept of God. That's why he's so adamant about making, quote unquote, God look the fool in man's eyes. He's trying his best to deface the being closest to God. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, I don't understand how you don't see this and you don't hear this with what he was saying. It was blatantly obvious. He has daddy issues too, but he has daddy issues and he blames God for the fact that no one helped him. So he had to power through and figure out how to deal with that stuff. And now here is a being that they're calling God, and he's like, nope, that's no God. That guy's a demon. Because if he was God, he would, and he's all good, he couldn't be all powerful, which would explain why he couldn't save me and all the other people who have suffered. But if he's all powerful and he just chose not to save me and all those other people, that means he's not good. He's not all good. So I have to show him for what he really is. It makes sense, but so many people are too busy complaining about the fact that he's skinny and he has long, goofy hair, and he kind of acts like Jim Carrey's Riddler with the tics and all the, the hammy acting, the over-the-top acting. So, this is calling a spade versus what your preference is. And preferentially speaking, I would have wanted the prototypical, the Lex Luthor that we had in Justice League and Superman the Animated Series. The smooth, bald-headed guy who's under the surface is batshit insane. I would have wanted that, but that's not what we have. He's not. And when I say batshit insane, I mean like calculating, but the plans themselves are crazy. The things he wants to accomplish are crazy. That guy would be cool, but that's not what we got because that's who they always give us. So they figured, hey, let's move forward and give you something a little bit different so that you would, we can start from scratch. And I don't see anything wrong with that. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been worse. They could have just not tried at all, but they tried. And I think they did a good job with what they gave us. Like I said, it's not my preference, but it was still done well. Let's see, who else? Is there anyone else of importance? Mercy Graves. So because China, a lot of investors from China have been getting involved in the U.S. film market or industry, we have to always have like a really hot Chinese or Asian woman in the film. And the fact that she was in there just to look good, I mean, she looked good. She was skinny as I don't know what, but she looked good, and she was wearing them Chase Me shoes. she just didn't do anything. Like, what was the point? It was literally like there was a girl in the movie, and then they tacked on the name Mercy Graves, and that doesn't even match what you saw. She hardly spoke. I think she had like 2 lines in the film, and then they blew her up. It's like, wow, that's what you think about, your your Asian comrades or something. Like, that's just weird. But yeah, she wasn't really noteworthy. Um, Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White. He had a lot to do this time, like a lot to say, and he was funny. I mean, you already know he can be funny. We've seen Lawrence Fishburne in so many movies, so we know he's capable. Um, so it was nice to see him actually doing stuff. Amy Adams as Lois Lane, she was good, um, but she's Lois, so she doesn't really have that much to do. Um, and I always think it's funny when they try to focus on her, but it was cool that they made her the moral center, and she wasn't a jerk. Like, the Lois that I'm used to is a jerk. So it makes you kind of, the opposites attract thing is what plays into the relationship between her and Clark, because Clark is this good person, and Lois is a jerk, complete jerk. But she has a soft spot for him, and I think in that case, it's because he's Superman. It's not because he's, Smallville, as she calls him. But this Lois is a little bit more realistic. She's more of a normal girl who just is really good at her job, and she doesn't take no for an answer, and she's tenacious, which is good. And you get that from Amy Adams. And Amy Adams is one of those, like, really regular girls. I've seen her in so many things, from The Office to Sunshine Cleaning. I've seen her in all kinds of stuff, and I never really thought of her as like this hot chick. Then you see her in Man of Steel. At least for me, I see her in Man of Steel, and it's like, huh, that works. I can kind of see why he likes her. She's not 100% like my type, but she works for this role. So, I don't mind her in this. She's a good Lois Lane. I mean, at one point, I was like, wow, she's a redhead. I mean, she so fits that I never really thought about it, because, Lois is traditionally a brunette, dark hair. I think she has blue eyes or green eyes or something like that. And she just looks a little bit more like tough. Whereas Amy Adams she looks very just unassuming, but when she speaks, you're like, wow, she's kind of tough. So, I don't know, she's doing her thing. She's a good actress. Now, the action. The action for me some of it was really good, and some of it was just like, eh. Overall, I felt like the 2 biggest things that were supposed to happen in the movie were the fight between Batman and Superman, and the fight between them and Doomsday. And I was not blown away by either. The Batman fight was okay, but once again, it was that struggle crap where, like, he's completely housing them, and then all of a sudden he's kind of struggling. Like, there's a portion of the fight where he's like getting beat up. I won't say beat up, but he's getting handled by all these guys. And I'm like, we play Arkham City and the Arkham games in general. We've been attacked by 20 guys or 30 guys with guns and knives, and, metahuman guys that are like 3 or 4 times the size of all the rest of them. And, somehow we make it work, and we don't fall down, and, we're not laying on the floor, and we're not getting shot in the head, and we're not dying. Why is it that this Batman, even though this is the first time we're seeing Batman freely run around and use real martial arts on people, why is it he's kind of struggling? He only had one real fight scene with regular guys. I mean, yeah, they're trained, but they're not trained like him. You go from seeing him fly back and forth around a room like he has superpowers to seeing him actually fight to the ground. And that bothered me. Like, people stabbing him. Like, he took gunfire at close range, survived an explosion just covered in his cape, but he got stabbed in the shoulder? Come on, guys. But, people won't complain because it's Batman. But I was not fully impressed with the way that action went off. I wanted to see him free-flowing around the room, just like Arkham City, and that's what it started to look like. The fight looked better with all the parts, in it, because the cut that we saw in the trailer was missing a whole lot of stuff, so it looked kind of weird that people were just going flying in different directions. But that was probably the best fight scene, and I was really surprised that that was what happened. The okay, the second fight in the film, second big fight, was the fight between Batman and Superman, which was meh. I mean, it was a lot of just Batman punching Superman in the face and then throwing him somewhere. And I was just like, really? That's it? That's all we get? We don't get any, like, martial arts? We don't get any, like, almost, like, death-defying feats? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there was the jumping down the hole with the zip line or the bat grapple or whatever, but there was nothing more. If you've watched the Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, I think it's in Part 2 is the fight. The fight is so epic in that fight. I mean, they're fighting on the street. They're fighting in through people's houses, on rooftops, in a construction site, all over the scaffolding and the frame of the building. I mean, it's insane. Batman takes a steamroller, two steamrollers, pulls the roller pieces off the steamrollers, bangs them together so his fists are stuck in the steamroller, and starts punching Superman with them. And like Superman is even kind of reeling from these punches until he blocks a double, crack, and they break around Superman. Like, how is it that you couldn't do something like that? You know what I mean? The idea is to wow the audience. The idea is not to try to be so overly realistic when you have a dude in powered armor fighting Superman. You know what I mean? Like, you've already passed the point of, realism and such. So I don't understand what it was they were trying to achieve by staying in line with that level of thinking. So, I don't know. That fight was disappointing. I was not amazed. I was not impressed. I was kind of like, ugh, once again, not pushing the envelope where you should, And then the final fight, which was all of them versus Doomsday, it was just a whole lot of people getting hit really hard and sliding really far, and discharges and a lot of, like, property damage, collateral damage. I was wondering to myself, when are they going to actually fight? When Wonder Woman showed up, I expected to see more 300 style, spinning and blocking and stabbing and chopping and spinning. You know how that fancy Grecian style of combat, that pancration with weapons. No, we didn't get that. Batman did what I thought he should do. He should be in the background kind of sniping and directing. He just kind of waited for opportunities to either draw Doomsday's attention away from the others, or to hit him with the kryptonite grenade that he had left. And that was cool. It made sense. It helped make the difference in the fight. So everybody was needed. And I like that. It made sense. So on the surface, if you're not an action junkie like me, you won't notice anything wrong with that. But if you are an action junkie, you'll be expecting more, and you get kind of serviceable action, And I wasn't impressed with that. I mean, even in Civil War's trailer, when you see Iron Man getting his behind throttled by Bucky and Cap, it looks more interesting, more frenetic, more like these guys are master fighters, and Iron Man is not. You know what I mean? And you can tell. And they didn't use their imagination there, and that bothered me. I mean, if you watch Sucker Punch, which is an underrated gem in my opinion that a lot of people give crap to because they don't understand the film, hence the name, there's a scene in the very last, actually all the action scenes, but mainly the very last action sequence in the film. The girls are infiltrating this train that has these robots on it. And the robots are they're like killbots. And they have guns, or they have, they're trying to punch them, and they're really strong. When they hit things, you're seeing like dents in the walls, and like they really gonna get throttled if they take damage from these robots. The way that they dodge, it's 4 of them versus like 10 or 20 of those robots. And the way they're dodging and coordinating their attacks at the same time, and just it's nuts. And it's one of those things where I'm like, how come we didn't get that level of crazy with Batman and Superman? That's what I was expecting. With Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, should have been 3 of them fighting as if they had one mind. You know what I'm saying? Like, no excuse for why they didn't push the envelope for that kind of action when you have 2 of the most powerful physical combatants in comics, and then you have one of the best human combatants in comics, and you didn't push it at all. That's bothersome. That's a missed opportunity. There's a lot of that in this film, a lot of moments where they could have taken advantage more so than what they did, and we would have gotten a better product. But in the end, we got what we got. It just, I guess, what the best way to sum up all of this is, as Immortan Joe said, mediocre. It was just mediocre. Like, everything was kind of there and then not there. Now, I did leave out the action sequence where Batman, this is the first time you see the Batmobile. Batman, like, really goes nuts, and he really goes nuts, and he's like smashing people with the Batmobile. He's running through stuff. He's using the guns on the Batmobile. I mean, you get to see exactly what that thing can do, and it's kind of crazy because it's like, wow, that is a serious, vehicle. But besides that, it's just like I said, it's just not really that amazing. There's so much in the movie that just didn't really get to that point that I was hoping it would get to. But I want to still go into a couple more things before I go, because the movie was such a big movie, and there was a lot of expectation, especially for us DC fans, that I don't know how we couldn't have so much to say, because I'm happy that we live in a world where we can watch Marvel and DC films, because then where would I get the joy of superheroes from if I can't watch both, And I love superheroes more so than I love either Marvel or DC. So just seeing superheroes in the movies makes me happy. And the fact that I get to do that is a big deal. Now, the problem that I have is the way that one company tries so hard to do, like, how do I put this? They try so hard to appeal to everyone, and then the other company doesn't try hard enough to appeal to the people who put them where they are. You know what I mean? Like, we are the reason why DC films exist, because we've been collecting their comics and we've been, like, on board with their stuff from day one. The fact that they're not really catering to us, they're trying so hard to change up the tone of their films, it's bothersome, because that's not the way that the books, these characters feel like completely different characters in the films than they are in the movies. I mean, in the comics. And that's not how it should be. And it's weird because when you watch Justice League Unlimited, or you watch any of the earlier animated films, like when Bruce Timm was still part of Warner Brothers Animation, like full on, everything before Justice League War, excluding Gods and Monsters, there was this level of complexity to those films, and you felt like, wow, this stuff is definitely not for kids. I mean, like, kids could watch it and they would only get a portion of it. Sorry, I'm getting some popcorn. But they would only get a portion of it, and adults would get everything that's happening. You know what I'm saying? Because it was for us. Now, I don't understand why those same writers aren't the ones they task with writing the films. They would write better films. They obviously have a better grasp on the characters than the guys who are doing the movies now. And I don't understand why this is the case, Like, it hurts my feelings. It really does. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't really explain to us, it doesn't really help get new people on board if the stories that the old heads would recognize aren't represented properly. And that just, it's annoying. That's not the way it should be. But I don't know. I'm so conflicted, because when I came out of the movie, I hated it. I completely hated it. Then I thought about things in the movie, and I was like, Ben Affleck was easily the best Batman that we ever got. They did a great job with that. But of course they would, because that's all they care about is Batman, Who else? Wonder Woman was perfect, because they had never done Wonder Woman on screen before. So it was like, if you get the guy who directed 300, he at least has an idea of what these kind of characters should feel like. So of course, she would seem a little bit more on point than than Wonder Woman's we've seen in the past, because we know she's supposed to be a Greek hero. She's been around for a while. She has ties to some of the history of the DC universe because she's been around for a very long time. So, I get that. That's cool. That makes sense. But Superman, it's like it's Batman versus Superman. He's one of the important characters in the film, and they don't seem to get Superman as well as they get Batman and Wonder Woman. There's always something lacking from the portrayal of Superman, and it's not the acting, because Cavill makes you believe he's Superman. I feel like that's Superman. It's the situations that he's put in that I don't feel like do Superman much justice. They feel like generic situations or very topical situations that kind of give you an idea but don't really seal the whole process or the whole deal. They don't really let you know what it feels like. You know what I mean? This movie did it to some degree. I'm not going to completely diss it, but I'm just saying, like, there should have been more pressing situations for Superman to take care of, more heartfelt situations where Superman was showing, like, I'm like this, even though the world wants me to be like this. I like the fact that they were a little more realistic. He didn't really care in the beginning about what people had to say about him, because he's not here for them. He's not here because they asked, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He's here because he's here. This is where he ended up, and he's helping because he's part of, mankind. But it was just weird. And then, of course, before I completely finish, I have to touch on a couple things. The dream sequences and flashbacks or whatever, there were a lot of them. People said they had problems with them, and I'm like, I think it's just that people have been used to having their hands held through movies, and there has to be that setup. It was a long time ago. Then it to the flashback, or it all happened so fast. Flashback, or 10 years ago, and then they're showing you what happened before, or someone falls asleep and then it fades into white, or fades to white, and then you see this is a dream sequence or something. Like, they need all that setup for them to understand that they're watching a dream sequence, but they didn't understand when it was happening, like, free flow. Yes, the editing was not the greatest, and that's part of the problem, but it was pretty obvious when you're seeing some of the subject matter that, like, this is a vision or a flashback or a dream sequence. It's not what's really happening. Batman running around in his Mad Max gear, like, Batman doesn't run around in Mad Max gear, so that couldn't have been, like, real life right now. So what's the confusion about? You know what I'm saying? That bats can't pick up people. So when you see a little boy being picked up into the sky by bats, it's a dream sequence, because that kind of stuff doesn't happen. You know what I mean? When you see Bruce Wayne being attacked by, a gargoyle monster in the crypt of his parents, that's a dream sequence, because why would a gargoyle monster just randomly be in his parents' crypt? It's just stuff like that, or like Superman talking to his dad. This is what he visualizes. This is what he's thinking of. Granted, I will say the way that stuff happened, those scenes happened, kind of felt like Supes was crazy because he walked up to his dad and he looked like, wait, my dad? What's he doing here? And he should have known. It's his mind. He's the one having the sequence. So maybe that's lack of direction where there should have been more direction. But you could still tell it was a dream. It was like dreaming a while awake, daydreaming type thing. He's thinking about his dad. What would his dad tell him in this situation? How do I deal with what I'm going through? So it made sense. So I don't get what all these fools are talking about. Like, you need everything delivered to you on a silver platter because you can't use your brain for yourself to figure out what you saw. And that's frustrating, because it's like it's a movie. If it's well written, they're not going to hold your hand. They're going to give you little bits and pieces, and you get to put those things together, because that's why you came to the movie, to pay attention to the film and, come to your conclusion based on the information you were visually given, sometimes audibly given. So I don't get that complaint, you know? And it bothers me that so many people are so slow that's a valid complaint for them. Well, you know, I didn't understand. It was just like too jarring, and like I admit that the editing was pretty bad, you know, in a lot of places in the film, because there were a lot of things that weren't super clear, but the dream sequences were extremely clear. The one thing I'll say that I could imagine people not being 100%, you know, clear about was the Flash. I mean, he had like stubble. He just shows up right at the end of another dream. So you're like, wait, is this a dream? But I think that was intentional so that you understand that this was time travel, but it was also a vision. You know what I mean? Like there was a vision of Apocalypse, which is, I think, Bruce Wayne's internalization of what he thinks Superman will end up like if left unchecked. You know what I mean? And then also, you know, you had Barry Allen time traveling. I mean, although it looked weird because he doesn't time travel standing still, he runs into the, you know, various time streams. So it was just strange the way that they did it, but it made sense. I mean, I understand how, like, if you're going to see this movie, chances are most people have some idea of the inner workings of the DC universe. So some of this stuff should not be surprising you every time. That doesn't make sense. What's the point? I just thought, honestly, those parts, they were all right. I didn't really have a whole bunch of problems with them. Now, the cameo of all the four other characters, Cyborg, Flash, and Aquaman. Wonder Woman was part of the movie, but, you know, she kind of cameoed because she was watching that information unfold. I thought that they kind of shoved it in there, and it should have been like playing on the computer, but the camera wasn't 100% focused on it, and while they're talking, you know, the viewer could look over and be like, wait a second, that's Aquaman, or wait a second, that's, you know, the Flash. It shouldn't have been 100% all up in your face like a commercial. For me, that was, you know, it's kind of lame, but I see what they're doing. Rather than, and I hope that something like this, but, you know, done better, is the trend. Put the, what do they call it? Put those little, what would be an end credit scene for Marvel, put that in the middle of the movie somewhere, but put it in there masterfully. Don't just force it in there, you know? So, you know, they could have done better. They just didn't. They just didn't. They just hurried to get it out there, and in the process, I think they missed another opportunity for greatness. And then the last thing I have to talk about is the ending. So, during the fight with Doomsday, Batman had created a bunch of weapons to kill Superman, you know, previously when they fought in Gotham. The idea was that he came up with these kryptonite gas grenades so that he could weaken Superman, beat him down, and then stab him with the kryptonite spear that he created from the big-ass fragment of kryptonite that was found in the Indian Ocean from the, you know, explosion of one of the world engines in Man of Steel. During the fight, Batman is about to kill Superman with that, which I'm like, really? It was just like that? That's it? Batman just comes in and is about to dominate Superman? This is the same guy who, it's like, Superman's fights are dangerous and he has so much power to kill all of us, so we have to kill him. Okay, fine. So Superman's collateral damage is bad. Batman, on the other hand, is branding villains so that they get killed when they go in prison. He causes insane property damage as well. He kills the villains, but it's okay for him to do it and not Superman. Anyway, he's about to stab Superman with the lance, and Lois shows up a few seconds after Superman says they're going to kill Martha. Batman's like, who's Martha? What are you talking about? Why did you say that name? Why did you say Martha? And Lois shows up and she's like, that's his mom. And then he stops because his mom's name is Martha also. So that's what stopped them from killing each other, you know, or stopped Batman from killing Superman. Anyway, then Lois takes Batman says, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna go get Lois. You need to go find out what Lex is doing. because there's like energy coming from the ruins of the crashed Kryptonian battleship. So while they go to do their thing, Lois picks up the lance and throws it in this like flooded stairwell or something. During the Doomsday fight, they're trying to figure out what to do, and then Batman is like luring him away, and he realizes, oh crap, we could use the lance. Kryptonite weapons would work. So I have 1 round left of my grenade launcher, and then I have the lance. We got to go get the lance. He doesn't make it back to the lance. He gets the Batwing gets downed before he could get to it, and that's when Wonder Woman shows up to protect him. Superman is fighting Doomsday, and Lois decides when she hears all this craziness or sees what's going on, she decides, oh crap, I probably should get that because they could use it. She goes to get it, and then she gets trapped by debris from Doomsday's discharge of energy. Superman hears her banging on the debris, flies over there, pulls her out of the water, and then dives into the water to go get it. Comes floating up to the surface because it's kryptonite all up in his face, and he's weak, and he's like, oh my God, whatever. And she's like, okay, you got it. And he's like, I have to do this. And she's like, don't do it, because he's been weakened drastically by the kryptonite. And she's crying like, no. And you have a feeling like, wait, they're going to kill him? He's going to kill himself? Like, no, don't do that. And then Superman flies over to Doomsday. And then Doomsday just had his hand chopped off by Wonder Woman. He grows back spikes. Batman shoots a kryptonite gas pellet, the final one, in Doomsday's face. Doomsday is weakened because that's what it does. Superman stabs him with the spear, and then uses one of his horns as like to gain leverage, so he can push the spear all the way through and kill him. And just as he does this, Doomsday stabs him with with the hand that now has all spikes. And then Superman continues pushing the thing through until it breaks through his back, and then dude dies. And then he drops, and then Superman dies. And you're like, what? Like, it wasn't even like epic in the way that it happened. At least in the comic books, they punched each other so hard. That final punch shattered and blew back buildings and all kinds of stuff. So you're just like, oh my gosh. This was just kind of like, stab, death. And you're like, it was cool. Don't get me wrong. It's just, it could have been visualized better in my eyes. But that's not even the issue. The issue here is, should they have killed off Superman so soon? Like, people like Angry Joe are really pissed and really sad because they're like, we've only had Superman for 2 movies and you've already killed him off. He's not going to stay dead, but 2 movies and he's dead. That sucks. Also, on the flip side, which is where my mind sees this, when you're watching the film has a sentiment that people do not appreciate Superman. People don't understand him. People think there's something wrong with him. People are waiting for him to become the villain. And he's been nothing but good to all the people all this time. Why can't you just accept that he's a good guy? So when they kill him, it's kind of like, it's letting you know that this is it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you guys didn't appreciate this guy who was here as like kind of a savior. You didn't even ask for him. Here he is. And you took him for granted. Now he's been taken from you because you didn't even care. And they give him the big 21-gun salute, and they, have the funeral for him, funeral for a friend. But like, the problem is that, in the comics, all the heroes that were inspired by him, they all showed up at that funeral. In this, who shows up at the funeral besides, people who actually knew him? No one, really. It's just a couple soldiers. Well, it's a lot of soldiers, in the 21-gun salute, big ceremony. But then it's, family and friends that show up at his family's house. It just felt like if you had saved the death for like way later, then it would have meant more. Doing it so early, I think most people are going to miss it. Even though in the context of the film, it's one of those things where like, in a relationship, it's like, if you take that person for granted, but you recognize, in the back of your mind, you recognize that person was worthwhile. And then you take them for granted the majority of the time you guys are together. When they're gone, you're really going to feel it because you disrespected the gift that was given to you. So with Soups, this is exactly what they got, and it's just kind of weird that they went there. So you find out he was gonna propose to Lois. So he had it sent. He had the ring sent to his house, to the farm, because she was supposed to come. I think the day after or so, she was supposed to come with him to go visit the mom, and he would have proposed to her there. So the ring gets there, but he's dead. He's there in a box, and they're burying him. She puts the ring on. She's sad. You're like, man, this dude was really good when you think about it. But, the internet and the way people look at stuff, they're not going to look at it that way. And the way that the movie presented this stuff, they could have done it in a better format. You know what I mean? They could have given us a little bit more and we would have been happier. But I don't know. It's really frustrating to see them miss these opportunities like this, So I don't know. I'm torn. I think some of the things they did were really good, but I also think that some of the things they did were kind of stupid and they could have done 1,000% better. So I don't know. We'll have to see what this all, we'll see how the people feel about this in the long run, because most people seem to hate this movie. A lot of people have like the Rotten Tomatoes score. I wanted to say, why are you guys even giving Rotten Tomatoes props? Rotten Tomatoes is such a bad example because it's not even half of all the critics out there. And a lot of people, like fans or super nerds that want to just hate on something, that's where they go first to put their responses, and that's how they get the ratings they get. I mean, how does Superman Returns have a lower score or higher score, than this? This movie was way better than Superman Returns. So it shows you what the logic is behind that site. So don't take that site as gospel. It's not. But overall, the movie is it's halfway. It's like a 6. You know what I mean? A 6 or a 7 out of 10. It's got so many good things. The things that are in there, for the most part, that work are well done. But they could have gone further, and it feels like it's restrained. Even for Zack Snyder, visually, a lot of things are restrained, especially the action. You think, like I said, watch Sucker Punch again. Ignore the all the other stuff because most of you don't get the movie in the first place. But just fast forward to the action sequences and watch where the camera is moving. Watch how the camera travels along the weapons as the weapons are actually doing what they're supposed to do. Watch as people are flipping out of the way of, gunfire, barely getting, avoiding the bullets and stuff, things that superheroes actually do. You're seeing these pretty girls do it. But in the movie that actually has superheroes, the best examples of superheroes, they're not doing this. You don't have Batman dodging bullets by a hair. You don't have, him throwing a batarang and the camera following the batarang as it cuts through all kinds of stuff. It just doesn't make sense. They just missed many opportunities to really wow the crowd. There was no, bullet time. There was no, things that were created to show off superheroes, and show off superheroics. None of that mess was represented. So I have problems with that. I mean, some of you may not. I do, because I know what these camera tricks or what these techniques were created for. And to see that you have Matrix and you have Matrix Reloaded and you have Speed Racer and you have X-Men movies that use these techniques, and you have Deadpool, and you have all these other shows or movies and stuff that use these techniques, and then you get Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and they don't even try, not like that. It's kind of not that good. So like I said, 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10. It's not terrible. I just was expecting more. And I think that if you want to watch Superman, Batman fight, just watch The Dark Knight Returns Part 2. It's a much better example of how the fight works. All the motivations and everything leading up to that fight make more sense. I mean, granted, Superman has a motivation for going to Gotham to fight Batman, but you kind of don't understand why Lex would make that particular thing happen. I mean, let me go back. You do understand what he wants to do, because I just explained this to you like in the earlier half of my video. He wants to deface God, and in their minds they see Superman as a representation of God. So that's why he wants him to fight Batman. And he kidnaps Superman's mother in the process, and he keeps referring to Superman as a demon because he doesn't believe he's a god anymore. You know what I mean? He believes the people's representation of God is a demon. That's the way he sees Superman. But in the grand scheme of things, if it doesn't work out, what did he actually accomplish? You know, like what happens if Batman did win and he killed Superman, and what does that prove? How come Lex wasn't interested in, see, here I am with more questions. How come Lex wasn't interested in revealing the bat to everyone? You know what I mean? Like, people know he exists because he's branding folks, so that means he's real. But like, how come he wasn't interested in bringing him out in the open? Also, a lot of people were like, how does he know? At the very end, he talks about how Darkseid, well, he's coming and he's hungry and he's found us and blah, blah, blah. He knows that our God is fallen and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, you know that he knows all this stuff about space because he asked the computer on the Kryptonian battleship to explain everything to him. So the whole several hours that he was in there, and I don't know that the machine itself, they didn't say, like, does the machine have some kind of interface that could just download the information into your mind, or does it have like the ability to like generalize like crazy to the point where it could take billions of years of history and distill it down into a couple hours, you know? But it explained everything to Lex. It explained, I mean, maybe he asked specific things. I mean, they didn't go into the details of what everything, quote unquote, entailed. But he did get an explanation for a lot of things from the computer on the ship. So for those asking the question, how does he know the Darkseid is coming? How does he know, you know, that all the other, you know, people know that Superman died? He knows because the ship told him. You know what I mean? Like, he had the direct link to something that's connected to something else outside, out in the ether and space. You know what I mean? So that's how he knows. You know, I know that's probably a Goyer thread because it's very like idea based and not very concrete, and that's David Goyer's style. But you know, that's one of those questions I kept hearing in reviews that like it's answered in there. But you know, the movie is full of tidbits that work if you know the DC universe, and there's tidbits that don't work if you know the DC universe. The movie's full of these moments where you're like, huh, I wonder if this, based on whatever information was given to you before the scene. And then there's a lot of moments where they flat out just explain to you a situation that makes perfect sense, and it's up to you to, you know, distill what you want to distill from it, you know, take what you want to take from it. But like I was saying before I got into this portion of my little rant, is that I'm really excited for Civil War. I am a DC, but like I said, I love my superheroes, period. Cap is my favorite on the Marvel side, next to, it's like Cap, Blade, and the Punisher. And since we're not getting Blade and we just got Punisher in Daredevil season 2, the one that gets to do the most work is Cap. So, and I liked everything that they've shown him in. Age of Ultron, Cap was my favorite part, even though the movie itself was meh. So anyway, I'm glad that we live in a world where we have the option, just like we've had with the comic books themselves. We can watch both, you know, we can read both. So it's kind of cool that that's the situation that we have. I wish that this movie had done more, you know, but maybe the home version, you know, the Blu-ray and DVD release will rectify all the issues that we have with the theatrical release. And I'm hoping that that's the case. So anyway, I've talked for a long time. I know there was a lot to say. There was a lot to cover. I glossed over the exact, how everything happened because I hope that many of you guys go see it. If you like this kind of stuff, go check it out. I mean, it's worth watching. It's not terrible. The Batmobile is amazing, but like some of the stuff that's awesome, you already knew it was going to be awesome because it dealt with Batman. So like, how often is Batman ever actually whack in a film? You know what I mean? Like, people loved Batman and Robin when it came out. People hated it when they thought about it, but they didn't have problems with the Batmobile. They didn't have problems with Batman. They didn't like the nipples on the suit, but they had problems with the overall film. You know what I mean? I didn't like most of it, but I have the Batmobile. I have figures from those movies. You know what I mean? Like, I liked Batman. I like Batman when he shows up in most stuff, but I never doubt that he's going to be cool. That's why I don't understand why people always are so quick to doubt him and say, oh, it sucks. I don't like that they cast, Ben Affleck as whatever. Like, you know that he's going to do well because he's the cash cow. So anyway, like I said, the cool stuff is cool because you know it's going to be cool because of who they focused on. The simple fact that they brought Batman into the film was giving that away. But the stuff that they dropped the ball on, they really dropped the ball on. So, it's one of those things. But go see it. Form your own opinion, because a lot of these critics, they're really going above and beyond to like hate the film and to put these thoughts out there that are like so personal. You know what I mean? They're shaping public opinion based on their personal experience with these characters, and a lot of them don't have that much experience with the characters. A lot of people are using New 52 logic as their explanation for what's going on in these films. A lot of these folks have never seen Justice League Unlimited. They weren't reading Superman and Batman in the 80s and the 90s. A lot of these reviewers weren't even born back then. So the opinions they're giving you are flawed, kind of half-assed opinions because they don't know enough to really say what they're saying or to back up what they're saying. And it's kind of frustrating. So figure out for yourself, watch it, come to your conclusion, but use factual information. Everything I told you in this film in this review, it was factual. You know what I mean? I told you what happened. I told you about, based on this is what I feel. I didn't go with like comic book episodes and the numbers and stuff, but if you were to read up, you would find things to back up a lot of what I'm saying, especially the parts about the Dark Knight Returns. There's a lot of things that happen in the book and happen in the movie that it's like, really? Like Batman using guns. That's all Dark Knight Returns. And a lot of fans complained, Batman doesn't use guns. In this version of Batman, he did. People were saying that he doesn't kill. The Frank Miller version did kill, It was even a joke when he was shooting the kids and he was like, rubber bullets. Honest. They're not rubber bullets. You were killing all those kids. You're shooting them. That's what he did because Frank Miller's crazy. It was even more evident in All-Star Batman, also written by Frank Miller. It shows the younger version of that Batman kidnapping Dick Grayson, calling him retarded, running over cops, and just doing whatever he wants, like a complete nutcase. And this is who they keep on trying to make Batman into, and the fans justify it because they're like, he doesn't have powers, and it doesn't make sense. But these are the reasonings, and if you look, you'll find them because they exist. It's real. So, like I said, find the information yourself, watch the movie, come to a conclusion, read up on what you need to read up on your own. Don't just take the reviewer's words for it. I mean, I try to give you facts. So if that works, then it works for you. But also go in and try to come to a conclusion of your own by doing the reading, by watching it's fun stuff to watch, you know what I mean? And some of these books are really fun to read. It's not like it's work. But, work for yours. Don't just take everyone else's word for it because a lot of these guys do not get it. And it's frustrating because they're on outlets that get their message to the mass. And they shouldn't. They really shouldn't. It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, that's it for me. You guys have been great. This has been my review of Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Peace outside.